Welcome back to another episode of the Shared Practices podcast. I don't know if you remember at the very beginning of the year, I wrote an email newsletter to you guys stating that my goal for 2018 was to not miss a single episode on a Friday upload. And if there was ever a week to miss it, it would have been this week. Richard and I had both texted each other seeing who recorded an episode, and the answer was neither of us. So I'm very lucky that Loren Israelsen was able to scramble together and get an episode recorded for us. We caught him in the middle of the night on his way home after work, and so I think this is a unique episode in the circumstances in which it is recorded, but nonetheless, I think it's a great episode. For those of you who remember Loren, he was a fourth-year dental student at University of Utah. Last time we spoke with him, he was helping out at a dental office with a cool buy option, and he had some really great thoughts. And in this interview, I didn't get into as much as I would have hoped. I think there was so much to talk about that we jumped around, so I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. A great perspective from a new grad who bought an office in Oklahoma and is, definitely doing a great job. He's a tremendous amount of success very early on, and is definitely, feeling a lot of the difficulties or the burdens that come with, maybe new grad practice ownership. So I think it's a great perspective for anybody out there considering that option. The more I talk to people in our audience, the more that is discussed. So I think this would be a great episode for anybody considering that. All right, without any further ado, here is Dr. Loren Israelsen. I have with me here today, on his drive home at midnight his time, Loren Israelsen, Dr. Loren Israelsen now. Last time we had him on the show, he was a fourth-year student at the University of Utah, and we talked about practice that he was helping out in and had a little cool buy option in, and now he's graduated from dental school, and he's moved to Oklahoma where he's purchased his first practice right out of school. And so I thought this would be a pretty cool discussion for us to have, new grad bought a practice with new grad bought a practice. So how's it going today, Loren?
It's good, George. It's good. You didn't have to say that it was midnight my time. People are going to think I'm crazy. And
I wanted to say that because I think our audience will just really appreciate you hopping on at this hour on your way home. So okay. if you hear some traffic, that's what it is. And so I think that's just really awesome of you to do that. And I wanted the audience to know just how dedicated to the show you really are.
And I don't think there should be much traffic. The roads are pretty clear, it looks like.
Oh, great.
But
so
anyway,
Loren, let's pick up from where our audience left off with you. So last we heard from you, you were in Utah going to dental school. So what has it been like finishing up, and then tell us about the practice that you purchased and, how that opportunity unfolded.
Yeah. So I can't remember when did was it last October maybe that we talked? I can't remember what it was, George.
But, yeah, it was in the fall.
So at that point I was working at that office in Utah. I had a buy option with the practice. It wasn't really in my long-term plans unless something miraculous happened with the practice, but it was a great learning experience. And so I worked there on Fridays during my senior year, and at the same time, last August, last maybe June or July, so it's been about 14, 15 months ago, I put together a marketing plan for finding a practice to purchase in Oklahoma. My wife and I decided that we were going to move to Oklahoma and start a DSO here.
Why Oklahoma?
We looked at several different states: Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado, Washington, Oregon, and Utah. And I like that it is partially a demographic factor. I like that in the Midwest, unlike Utah, you have a lot of towns and cities within drivable distance. Whereas, it's like from here, I'm within about 10 million people within a 4 to 5 hour drive. And whereas in Utah, that's that same amount of people, you got to drive, 12 hours. So that was a portion of it, because I know I wanted to build a DSO. Another portion of it was family, finding a place that was family friendly, somewhere that had or were Mormon or Latter-day Saint, and so we wanted to find somewhere that was close to some of that religious background with the worshiping, and that was a part of it too. So yeah, I guess those three things: religion and family and business demographics.
Cool. So you sent out your mailer.
Yep. So we put together a marketing program, found 500-600 dentists, and sent that out. Put together a website. Cold called. I cold called all 500 or 600 dentists. A whole bunch of them are already retired or have already sold their practices. But got about 50 responses back. People that wanted to sell came out to Oklahoma, interviewed all of them, and found several practices that I was wanting to purchase. The one that I'm in right now, the first practice, I felt like a good practice for me to be the main producer in, and negotiated terms with the deal. And I think by February or March of this year, and then it was just kind of a waiting game until I finished up school and was able to move out here. So.
And Loren, you said something that I think a lot of our listeners may not have caught on. So I wanted to just kind of circle back to it. So you said that you cold called 500 to 600 dentists, and that was probably in addition to sending out your mailer. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I sent out the mailer, and then I cold called all of them and found out what the email address of their office was, because most of the dentists didn't come to the phone because they were patients. So my point in calling was to get the email address so that I could then reach out to them again over email. And then I cold called them all again the ones that I didn't get any response from. So I cold called them twice, sent emails twice, sent mailers twice.
See, and I think for a lot of our audience, I get a lot of frustration from lack of opportunities. And in my opinion, I think the biggest thing that people are not doing is following up. And I really like what you did. You sent 2 mailers, 2 phone calls, 2 emails, and you got 10% of your humongous list to, genuine opportunity. I think that's very impressive. So that's very, very impressive.
A lot of them weren't fantastic practices. Some of them were like doing 80, 90,000 a year, but there were a good number of practices that, if I was just doing a solo practice, I would have, there were really good opportunities. A lot of them didn't fit my mold, but yeah, I think that's where it's at, is really the follow up. You catch a lot of people on the second follow up, they hadn't seen my letter, but then on the second follow up, they saw my email, or I didn't catch them on the first phone call, but then I just happened to catch them on the second phone call.
So explain to our audience the DSO component. So you've known from a long time that you've wanted to have a DSO. So how does that affect the acquisitions that you're looking at? So what would fit your mold versus not?
Well, for this initial time period, I was looking, planning for the first year, kind of what I was wanting, right? And I'm still working on what my DSO model practice is going to be, but I was basically looking for a practice that I thought I could reproduce the dentistry, that was in a good location, that had a lot of opportunity, because I wanted to buy a practice that was going to be cheap, that I felt like I could grow and use that cash to grow my DSO. So that was the main impetus for the first one. And then also the location. I knew where I wanted to be, and so I looked at the location, and there were a lot of practices that disqualified themselves based on location, that wouldn't really work, because I wanted to be somewhat centralized so I could be able to buy multiple practices and not be traveling 2 hours each practice. So those two things were the main things that I was looking for with these initial purchases.
So far, you have purchased a practice, and so what do you have lined up right now?
In terms of, what do you mean?
In terms of acquisition. So right now you've purchased your first, and your plan is multiple. So do you have any others lined up?
Yes. So I have one other practice closing on October 1st. and looking for the third acquisition currently, but don't have anything completely set up yet.
So with 3 practices, then how long do you anticipate you're going to kind of be with 3 before you consider going to more?
Good question. And I mean, I don't know when the third one's going to happen, but it's just going to be based off of financial ability and my personal bandwidth, how much I'm going to be able to handle. And so I'm going to evaluate and reevaluate as we go.
First, a word from our sponsor, Q Optics. Does anyone remember the case from the iPhone 3? I think it was 3S or 3G, whatever it was. And then also the old like Galaxy S, Samsung Galaxy S. They were thick, bulky, black cases. And they weighed a little bit more, and they weren't so sleek. When I look around at a lot of loupes, that's what I see. I see these big, bulky cases holding the optics. And actually, when you look through the loupes, you get a little frame as you look through the little telescopes. You can see this black outline. And you get used to it. It's normal because you're using them all the time. But I never realized how much that frame took up until I tried on one of the pairs of Q Optics prismatic loupes. I remember we were at Buca di Beppo, the Italian restaurant where they had given their presentation, and I put on the frame, and all I could see was these 2 perfect little circles of magnification without a black circle or an outline surrounding the optics. I could just see around the long telescopes without those taking up another portion of my field of view. Q Optics has taken a solid titanium unibody case with a carbon shroud encircling the lenses, and they've made it smaller, more lightweight, less in the way. If you're sick of wearing loupes around that look like they have a iPhone 3 case on them, that look kind of dorky, and you want something that actually looks good and allows you to see around it, you should try out Q Optics. Give them an email at sales@q-optics.com. Use the promo code SP16 for $100 off your pair of loupes or $300 off your loupes and light combo. If you upgrade your smartphone when they come out with a better looking, better functioning, more lightweight version, why wouldn't you do the same with your loupes? Q Optics, making better loupes.
I like that. I think that's probably, I think especially in this time, well, talk about, I haven't even asked you because, we've talked, but I haven't asked you on air, how has it been going in the first practice? As a new owner right out of school, how has that adjustment been?
It's been pretty crazy, George. I mean, everything that you've said in your episodes talking about your experience, I've experienced pretty much the same thing. So the doctor, I'll tell you just a little bit about this scenario. So the doctor, it was a father-son practice. The father was like 75 and he retired a year ago. And he's the one that I sent the letter to. And his son, who happened to have the same name, was like 48 or 49 and got my letter that I sent for his dad. And he called me up and said, "Hey, I'm interested in retiring." He kind of did the Justin Short thing and invested in a bunch of real estate and had enough money to retire, and he was burned out and didn't really enjoy dentistry anymore. So anyways, it's family practice has been in, the same family name. Even the father and son have the exact same name for 35 or 40 plus years, I think. So that was tough going in, where he retired on a Friday and I went on a Monday, and most of the patients didn't even know yet. They hadn't got their letter in the mail. So that was a little bit tough. He's been referring specialty stuff out forever. And so a lot of the stuff he has for a lot of the instruments and equipment he has for surgery and endo, even perio, like he just has never kept it up to date. So I've been having to either figure out new stuff that's ancient or buy new equipment, not necessarily equipment, but like instruments and supplies. Like some of his supplies, I'm pretty sure he's been using. Well, probably shouldn't say this. A lot of the stuff had expired, So, I'm using a lot of, well, I start to use it and then I realize that it's expired. And so that part's been interesting. It's kind of been like a startup in that I feel like I'm having to buy and like equip the office, which was part of my due diligence that I missed. I should have seen that a little bit. If I would have looked a little bit deeper, I could have seen that. Half of his computers were Windows XP. So, of course, Open Dental doesn't really support Windows XP, and it's just a ancient system. So I didn't catch that in the due diligence and had to ended up replacing the computers because it was cheaper to get refurbished computers with Windows 10 on it than it was than just to upgrade the computers. So he had a brand new assistant. So she struggled with a lot of things, and she actually has ended up moving on to another practice. So having to learn, when I've hired 4 new assistants in the last month. So learning with the hiring, the firing process. Oh, here's a fun story. We hired a girl for the front desk who said she had no dental experience. She just had medical experience working on the phone. Hired her for a couple hours a day to be calling patients and working on the hygiene schedule. Find out a week after I hired her from another dentist in town that she had embezzled from him, and she'd worked for him for a little while. She'd embezzled a lot of money from him. And so that was a fun little adventure and a good learning experience for me to realize you really got to do the background checks. Luckily, I don't think she had access to anything. She hasn't been back. I sent her a text on the day I found out she's got to come in for work. Sent her a text and said, "Hey," because I didn't know what to do yet. I wanted to make sure I could try to fire her without it being on unemployment, and I hadn't had her sign an employment agreement or like the employee handbook or anything like that. So while I was waiting to hear back from my attorney to see if he had any ideas on what I could do, I sent her a text and said, "Hey, just so you know, I need to finish filling out your finish the hiring process and do your background check. Can you bring in your info, your driver's license and all that?" And she just barely showed up at the practice, and she turned around and left and hasn't showed up since. So that was a fun experience and kind of a kick in the gut a little bit, realize you really got to do background checks. Clinically, it hasn't been terrible. I think clinical speed is too much of a worry for most dental students. They feel like, oh, I got to get my speed up.
Thank you. Yes.
I don't think that's the biggest worry that you should be worrying about, because you definitely have to have confidence in what you're doing in dental school, right? Like you got to get to a point where you feel confident that you can do a crown and a filling and an extraction, and decently confident you can do a root canal, maybe practice on extracted teeth if you don't get a ton of experience. But like once you have that confidence, it's going to come with time, and it's going to come with having an assistant sitting next to you to be able to make things go quicker. So anyways, long story short, I don't think clinical speed is the main thing you should be worrying about. Talking to patients has been, learning how to communicate with patients has been, believe what you say in dental school, even if they don't have a ton of money. And so I think that's been a huge thing to be working on daily and trying to figure out what I'm saying. I think leadership skills, that's something daily that I'm trying to work on that is hard. Any scenario, it's hard to learn how to be a leader. And then just all the little minutia of running a business, that stuff's been not hard, but just time consuming, super time consuming. I remember listening to a podcast with, the first, I think Justin Short told him that the first little while it was going to take a long time, or take a lot of work to kind of get all the systems in place, and then he'd be grateful for it later. And so that's definitely true. It takes a lot of work to get all the systems in place and just the little minutia things that need to be done. That's kind of it in a nutshell.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's been a lot of, I think what you're talking about, front loading the process. And, I think from my perspective, I think I had it much easier than you have, where you came into a practice that maybe didn't have as much in place as the office I walked into. Office I walked into was a bit bigger, 2-doctor practice, maybe some more systems, more refined over the years. And so I walked into more of an established office that had, not that yours wasn't established, yours probably older than mine, but the fact that maybe mine had some systems ironed out that yours didn't. And so you feel like yours was a lot like a startup because you're kind of putting things in place very similar to the way you would with a startup. And so I think a lot of that frustration or maybe time-consuming tasks are particular with your acquisition. But would you also think it's because of the fact that you're trying to implement systems very early on duty or long-term plans that are making it a little bit more time-consuming for you?
Probably. I mean, that's what I like to tell myself. So I'm trying to do everything so it's simple and scalable and efficient, so I can roll it out to the next practice and automate the process for each acquisition. And that's more simply said than done. So I mean, that has been, a kind of a stressful thing, is trying to perfect the system as I'm going and hoping that I don't have to go back and break the system and redo it. But that's been part of it. I think another part of it was when the doctor before, he was, cutting back time, and he had taken hours off, and like you said, he had no systems in place, but the team was used to doing very little work. There was enough team there that was a 2 and a 3-doctor practice just recently within the last couple of years, but he'd scaled down and his team had stayed on. So his team had gotten used to no systems and very little work. They said that they'd sit around for half the day with nothing to do. And then we came in and just kind of opened up the doors, and we haven't done any marketing, and we've grown quite a bit just by opening up hours. And I hired an associate. I signed up an associate to work for me during dental school. And so when she also graduated, and so she's working for me. So the team went from very low production, lackadaisical, just kind of whatever happened to happen. And now it's a 2-doctor practice. It's kind of, we just open the gates, and patients are wanting to come in that were trying to get appointments before, but there was never, he was always booked out. So it's changed a lot for them. So trying to fix these systems that have been in their head a certain way that they've done for years, but is not an efficient way, I tried not to change very much first month, but every day, there's a new system that's just broken, that isn't working for a 2-doctor practice that's doing high production, relatively high production from what it used to be. And it's totally broken at this level. And so we're having to go and really figure some stuff out right now. And anyway, that's where we're at right now.
So tell me about this. So you're a new grad and you hire an associate right out of school. I mean, is that really what happened?
Yeah. So I actually was recruiting some of my classmates to come work with me. That didn't pan out. And I had a letter of intent on 3 practices to buy within a month. in July and August. And looking back, it's, things happen for a reason, I think. And it's probably good that did not happen. That my classmates didn't work out, and I wasn't able to buy all three of them. So one of them I dropped, and then anyway, so I was looking for associates during my final year of school, and met this associate at a recruiting meeting, and so yeah, it just kind of worked out that way. So I've been trying to plan with the end in mind, for a while, and that was part of it, was to start recruiting associates immediately.
So, what was it like? I'm assuming, were they a new grad also?
Yes.
So it was blind leading the blind a little bit clinically?
Yeah, it is the blind leading the blind a little bit. And we collaborate with each other on a lot of things. We've made good relationships with specialists in the area. We figured out when we should, refer certain stuff that isn't going to go as well. And, we collaborate with other mentors that we have. But yeah, it is a little bit of the blind leading the blind when we're discussing clinical things together. So that's true.
No, I think that's, my wife and I practice together. We're both new grads, obviously. And I think it's totally fine. It's just very interesting to me that, you've been able to pull all this off, because I feel like in dental school, at least the way I felt, is you're so much waiting. You're waiting for your career to start, and you feel like you're really like chomping at the bit, and then you get at it. And then finally, I feel like you are the one holding yourself back instead of, circumstances holding you back. Is that what it's been like for you?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
So overall, how has the whole experience been? Buying a practice out of school, and now, anticipating, your second, and then hopefully, soon your third. What has that whole thing overall, the whole experience been like?
It's been a fantastic learning experience, just from start until now and continuing. I don't know, man. That's a good question though. It's been fun. It's been fun, but it's been hard. It has been way more stressful than I could have imagined. I knew it was going to be stressful, but I don't think you can anticipate what the stress feels like.
I think that's a great point. Did you lose any weight?
And I lost about 20 pounds.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Derek lost like 25. I lost 10. It's stressful. you just don't eat.
Well, I eat, but I feel like in dental school, well, actually, I don't eat as much. That's for sure. I don't have time. I don't have time to eat as much as I did. And in dental school, I felt like I ate all the time, and I was just sitting around doing nothing. But now you not only the mental. I think mental stress burns calories, right? Is that a thing, George?
I have no idea, but
anyways, I have lost weight, but it's not a bad thing. I was getting a little bit too much around my midsection.
No, me too. I think the weight I lost was good. So I wanted to take a minute to talk about the sponsor for today's episode, Lendeavor. Lendeavor is the modern lender to dental practices. With innovative software, exceptional service, and decades of combined experience in dental practice lending, Lendeavor is reshaping the experience of getting a practice loan. Practice owners are some of our economy's most highly trained and hardest working entrepreneurs. Yet, financing a practice takes too long and costs too much. Lendeavor is a team of credit experts, software engineers, computer scientists, financiers, lawyers, and academics that have come together to deliver market-leading rates, speed, and convenience. They've built software that takes complicated transactions, like buying your first practice, and makes them simple. As a result, you spend less time applying for your loan, and they spend less time processing it. This efficiency means faster funding and lower rates for you. Whether you're acquiring your first practice, remodeling, or expanding your existing practice, buying commercial real estate, or even updating equipment, take the first step today by pre-qualifying online in minutes. I'll leave a link in the show notes. Lendeavor's online pre-qualification is safe, secure, and seamless, and pre-qualifying with Lendeavor will never affect your credit score. Click the link in the show notes or send an email to info@lendeavor.com to learn more. Financing made or arranged pursuant to California Financing Law, license number 60DBO53100. But Loren, I wanted to conclude on. I know that you have to go soon. You're a very busy guy. But I wanted to conclude on the idea of new grads buying practices. So having been through this experience and having it be fresh, but you're still you're coming out of it. What is your thoughts on new grads buying practices out of school?
I think it's a great idea, but I think as I've gotten into it, I don't regret what I've done in the least, but now I can see that there's nothing wrong with being an associate, if for nothing like 6 months, So I'll tell you just a little bit more about the first little bit, and kind of what added the stress. And I could have avoided some of these things, but I didn't have my my business, my LLC started, and I don't know if this was wrong, but I was under the impression that I couldn't get the business to buy my practice started until I had my dental license, because it was a PLLC, it's a professional corporation.
Okay.
And so I didn't have it started. My plan was to take the jurisprudence exam, get my license, and start the business, and then open my bank accounts. And that was probably a stupid idea, because so I took the jurisprudence exam on a Thursday, got my license on Thursday, opened my business on Friday, and my bank accounts on Friday. So at that point, and then on Saturday, signed all the documents to buy the practice and started on Monday.
Whoa. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think then I also applied for my NPI number, my group NPI number, my DEA. Oklahoma has a separate narcotics license. So didn't have like anything set up from the beginning, right?
Wow.
And started dentistry like right after I got all this stuff going. I was paying for all the business expenses out of my personal debit card, because I didn't have it took the bank 3.5 weeks to get me a debit card for my bank account. Anyways, so that was a little bit stressful, because I just didn't have anything ready, and that's not because I wasn't trying to. It's just because I got my license and then bought the practice, a day later, 2 days later, and started like immediately after that. And so that I would say is non-advisable. So if anything, if you're moving to another state, or if you have to get your license, I would at least, maybe wait a month or month and a half to get everything situated, so you can kind of start without putting yourself behind. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I don't think it's bad to go out and be an associate for 6 months. If anything, just to get over that first hump of clinical dentistry and learning what it's like to present treatment, all those kind of fun things, and not be worried about the business at the same time. I don't think it's a bad idea. You can do it. Like, you've done it. Derek Williams did it. Like, a lot of people do it, but it's not a bad idea to go out and be an associate for just a few months. And then the last thing that I've thought about it, because I've talked to a couple other dental students that have asked me this, and I think if you want to buy right out of dental school, don't buy just because you want to buy right out of dental school. Because if you do that and you don't find the right practice, I think that sets you way further behind than if you be an associate while you're trying to find the right practice. If you find the right practice, great, go right into it. But don't feel like you have to force yourself to buy a practice just because you really want to own right out of dental school. I think that's all my thoughts on buying out of dental school.
I think those are all really great points, and I want to add something, and I want to see if you agree with me. So I, bought a practice out of school, obviously. We're in the same point, a few months out. And a lot of my classmates have gone into associateships and whatnot. And talking to a lot of them, or some of them, I feel like clinically, they've grown much more than I have. They're in a place where they're with another doctor who does more advanced procedures, and there's some coaching involved for some of them. And so I feel like in my situation clinically, I have not grown, very much.
Oh, absolutely.
Compared to what I could have grown as an associate. And so I think too, an added layer to this is how clinically confident or accomplished in certain procedures do you want to be? And I would try to get where you want to be clinically prior to ownership. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I know several, because I honestly haven't had much time to focus on clinical CE, like even online CE. Anything that I want to learn clinically, I haven't had very much time to focus on it. So I'm basically doing bread and butter dentistry and hoping I get to a point where I can start learning more about implants and, maybe ortho or, stuff like that. But I talked to some of my classmates and I know that they are growing a lot more clinically than I am. So that is a huge thing. Actually, that's a good point. And I hadn't thought of it in that way before, but I think that's a massive, upside to being and that, but the thing with that is if you're going to go and be an associate, I think you got to find a good associateship, right? You don't just go and find any associateship that's going to let you be a dentist. I think you go and find the associateship that,
you want clinical mentorship.
Yeah. Or even business mentorship. If you find a place that you want to be involved in long term and they're going to help you either buy practices and, become partners or teach you how to run a practice and let you kind of see that side of the business. Whatever your goal is, like figure out what your goal is for where you're wanting to go and then find an associateship for that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, I even have it worse. I think you do a fair amount of extractions and root canals, correct?
I do. Well, actually not a ton. It's an interesting practice. The patient base is an older patient population, and he did tons of amalgam on life.
Oh man.
And so there's a ton of broken teeth. There's a ton of recurrent decay. There's not a ton of surgery, to be honest. And endo is here and there. There's just tons of fillings and tons of crowns.
For me, I walked in and, at this point, my clinical menu is crowns and fillings, and I do some Invisalign, but that's pretty much it. I refer out all of my root canals pretty much. I'll do some easy ones, but I really have only done one. And so we brought an in-house periodontist in to do our implants and extractions because I just am not good enough at them where I feel confident enough to get into a lot of those procedures. And I think, clinically I'm unique because I haven't really had the opportunity to grow because I've been very focused on other things. And so I think, you just have to make that, if you're going to do it, you have to know that you're making a sacrifice clinically.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. That's a really good point.
All right, Loren. Well, I appreciate your time. Do you have anything else you'd like to add to the episode before we wrap up?
No, it was fun, man. It was fun. Thanks for getting on the phone with me at 12:33.
We appreciate you coming on, Loren. Thank you very much.
Talk to you later, man.
All right. I hope you guys liked that episode. I thought Loren was you're really just a wealth of information and perspective. I think that when I listen to him, I hear a lot of things that he does incredibly well, and maybe small things and characteristics that he has that have made him successful to date and will likely make him very successful in the future. And I think it's sometimes difficult to pick up on them. I did highlight in the episode his follow-up, his persistence in deal finding. I think is one thing a quality that Loren has that I find maybe more buyers need to have is the ability, the willingness, and the understanding of following up with every single dentist, 6 times, if you consider 2 calls, 2 emails, 2 mailers. That is the kind of persistence and, effort that is required in some markets, especially to get great deals. And he had a plethora of opportunities to the point where he could have bought multiple offices right out of school, which, he is doing, but he could have bought more than he is. So I think his ability to find practices was one thing that he did incredibly well. I think the second thing he did incredibly well is having end game in mind. So he did things with the idea of his DSO, and that's his plan. So all of his actions are fitting in the framework of his long-term goals. The type of practice he bought, where it is located centrally so that he can go all over. I think he just really has done a great job of sticking to his end goal and doing everything now to fit the long-term, as opposed to just, like he said, buying a practice just to buy a practice. So I'm very, very impressed with Loren. He's somebody who continues to impress me, and I think there were so many gems in this episode. And I'm happy that he agreed with my perspective on maybe new grads jumping into practice ownership as a halt to your clinical development. In my mind, I think the GPR question gets thrown around a lot. And, if somebody had to put me in a vacuum and think for 2 years you cannot buy a practice, what would you do? And if I had 2 years where I could not buy a practice and I had to do something, I would probably do a 1 year really heavily, really highly regarded GPR, and then a 1 year associateship at some sort of practice where I could grow clinically, and then I would buy a practice. I feel like that type of clinical background would make you really be able to jump into practice ownership right away and grow the practice internally by being able to confidently add procedures. So that is something that I've been thinking about a lot, and I shared the perspective a little bit on the show with Loren, but it is something that I've just been thinking about over time. I think maybe for that 1 year to practice ownership person, maybe residency doesn't make a ton of sense. Maybe some sort of private practice experience would be better. But I really think for somebody who's going to wait a while, it's really in your best interest to grow as much clinically as possible prior to practice ownership and use that pre-ownership time to expand your skill sets, both communication with patients, just being a dentist in general, and then adding procedures. So I think that's all I have to say for the episode today. I appreciate you guys sticking around for this one. I know that audio quality, we're going to try to clean it up as best we can. But it was the circumstances which we recorded, it wasn't ideal. So I appreciate you guys sticking around for that. I think Loren just did a great job, was a wealth of knowledge, and hopefully we'll continue to have him on the show as he grows his corporation. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. Thank you guys for all the iTunes reviews. And then next week, we'll pick up on regular Shared Practices episodes with Richard again. All right. Bye-bye. We're going to introduce a new segment to the show today, the Metrics That Matter Most, brought to us by Practice by Numbers. I'm sure that everyone has heard someone say, doctors are the worst business managers. That may be the case for some dentists, but it doesn't have to be the case for you. Successful dental practices consistently monitor and seek to improve a few key metrics. Practice by Numbers dashboard analytics software provides a simple way for you to track and improve the metrics that matter the most. Today, we are looking at the percentage of perio patients. Current medical wisdom tells us that this metric is important to the health of your patients and your practice. Periodontal disease is linked to at least 8 major systemic diseases and is prevalent in about 50% of the population. For this reason, when we see a practice that only has 50 to 20% perio patients, we know that this is a great opportunity for the practice to increase revenue. This is productivity that can be added without the dentist lifting a finger. When we share with the hygienists that their percentage of patients with perio disease is unusually low, we typically find that they have been doing a lot of bloody prophies. Many times, a small investment in a good perio update is all it takes to get back on track. We like to set up a custom dashboard for hygienists so they can log in and track their progress. They can instantly see how many perio procedures they are doing and work towards properly treating and charging for perio procedures. A healthy goal in a typical dental practice would be that the percentage of perio patients is between 30 and 35%. Higher if your demographic includes many seniors, and of course lower if you have a big pediatric presence in the office. To learn more about using smart data to manage your business, visit practicebynumbers.com.